Welcome to Refocused Radio. We are back again, and this time we have two special guests. We're going to have Pastor Mike Hayes, and also we're going to have Dr. Jeffrey Garner. They are going to share with us a new book that you need to go get right now. It's already out right now on Amazon. It got 5 stars. Got a lot of people talking about it. I mean, over 100 plus. I think last time I checked, it's 140 something ratings. So this is definitely something you want to tune into. The title of the book is Real Happy: Jesus' Surprising Path to Genuine Joy. And I think you're going to get a good take out of this because a lot of times we are always shopping for a new book and something that's going to inspire us. And this is going to do just that. So first and foremost, I want to welcome you both to the show, Pastor Mike Hayes, and also for you, Dr. Jeffrey Garner. I know y'all are busy with y'all schedules, so thank you for clearing some time talking to our audience today. How y'all doing?
Well, it's our pleasure. Thank you for having us on. We're looking forward to the talk.
I appreciate
Great to
it.
be here. Really excited to be on the show.
Well, I appreciate it. So let's get right to the chase because y'all, you can Google them on Google. They're pretty high maintenance. They got a lot of good stuff on the resume. So we're going to go right into the book. Let's go with Mike. How did you had a chance to meet Dr. Jeffrey Garner, and what sparked the idea to make this book happen?
That's a great question. Jeff and I met, we knew of each other, but met in about 2010 and at a conference that actually he hosted in his building. Actually, he let us use it to host a conference in his building in San Francisco. And as I got to know Jeff, I respected his work and his brilliance, his scholarship, his mind. And Jeff can tell some of this as his own story, but from me, I uh, I had this book in my heart. I was in Israel a few years earlier, and I was there on the mountain of Beatitudes where Jesus taught these principles, and just felt it in my heart really strongly to write a book about happiness because I was learning a lot that I didn't know. And the reality is, everybody in the world wants to be happy, but everyone in the world is not happy. And I was basically one of them. I was doing everything I knew to do right. I was working hard. I had a good family and friends and so forth. But deep down inside, I wasn't real happy. And we can get into the core reasons for that. But one of them is that so many of us in the world have had whatever our experience is, whatever our religious background is, and mine happens to be Christianity, but whatever your background is, it is replete with guilt and shame and feelings of remorse, and fairly sure that God is not pleased with us. We're always striving to make him happy. Pretty sure he's not really happy with us. And that's what a lot of religion amounts to is the pursuit of trying to make a reluctant and unhappy God happy with us, even though we know that we're flawed and not perfect. So when I had a real breakthrough with that and understood how much God wants us to know how happy he is with us and wants us to have a relationship that is mutually enjoyable. You know, when you start to see God as your father, you can't imagine a good father, and he's a good father. I couldn't imagine a father. I had a great father. My late dad was a great father. And I knew how much he loved me and how thrilled he was when I was happy with whatever I was doing. He was happy with me. And so when I changed my concept and started looking for it in places where it should have been obvious, but it wasn't, it revolutionized my life. And now I have gone through difficult things as we all face in our lives, but I have a deep settled joy and a happiness that I didn't have for much of my life. And I found myself trained to pastor, raising up a church where I was encouraging others. And I wasn't even sure I was in good standing on some days. My relationship was shaky, because I thought it was based on my behaviors and performance. And if I was doing good, I thought God was probably okay with me. If I wasn't, or had made any kind of a mistake, I was sure that He wasn't. And then that all got turned on its head. And when I understood, and in the research of this book, and Jeff is a brilliant scholar and researcher, and we actually got really serious about this because one of the mistakes that I made, and that I think a lot of people make, and I want Jeff to amplify this. But one of the mistakes I was making is that I wasn't sure God wanted me to be happy. And I was sure that it was somehow trivial. In fact, when I first felt the impetus to write this book, and I talked to Jeff about it, I was questioning the importance of it because I was sure that to God, as big and great as He is, that happiness must be a really trivial subject for Him. And when I found out how anchored He is in us being filled with joy as His highest creation and how happy He wants to be and is with us, it changed my world. So Jeff and I took a deep dive into this, and I understand now what I didn't before. Happiness is not only not trivial to God, but our happiness is of extreme importance to Him.
And with that said, for you, Jeff, let you get in here too. When you think about the Beatitudes and how they often deal with pain and poverty of the spirit, mourning, persecution, how do you hope when readers start reading this book can get a better grasp to the sense of Jesus calling that happiness to take effect? Because it's not something that I believe we just kind of do. Sometimes it's something we have to learn.
Yeah, I like the way you framed that question. When Mike asked me to kind of participate on the side of participate in research of it, so it was his moment. Like he had a spiritual moment in Israel where on the Mount Beatitudes, where he really sensed that there was more to this. And so when he invited me onto the team to be part of researching and working through it, I didn't have any idea of like where this was going. I was just kind of like, oh, let's dig in and let's see what it is. I mean, I'm not sure. And he had said, because he had already done some research, he had said, I suspect that this is happiness. And my initial thought, like what you're asking, my initial thought was happiness and mourning, happiness and hungry, happiness, and like the language was so there was such a stark contrast of the things that we typically associate with unhappiness, is now Jesus is kind of connecting these dots together, right? So poor in spirit, hunger and thirst, meek, and so I was like, I'll research, I'll jump into it. And I remember that looking at the word, digging into the word a little bit, and then digging back into the kind of the Greek idea of where makarios, the Greek word for happy, where that comes from. And then I was like, so my doctoral, my expertise is in the field of exegetical, so original languages and exegetical theology. And I was like, this is really weird. Like, why didn't the translators translate this as happy? Because it is obviously happy. There is another Greek word for blessed, and that's not the word Jesus uses. So why are we using that word in English? So I'm digging there, doing a little bit of research, and then I started having my own epiphany around it, which is translators do this sometimes because one person kind of sets the precedence and then everyone else kind of follows. And I think for translators, the thought was, well, happy is just too fluffy. Happy is just too shallow. Jesus couldn't possibly be talking about happiness. So let's go ahead and call it blessed. Well, for us, blessed is so flat. I mean, what does that even mean anymore? And oftentimes we put it in this kind of this ethereal place out here. It's kind of, ooh, you're blessed. Well, and it's so abstract. We don't even know what that means. It's like, but Makarios isn't. Makarios is like, if you're in Greece, Mike and I've been to Greece a couple of times together, and Makarios is the word they use for blissful. It's not just like I'm happy with a smile. It's like I am like belly laughing happy. And that this is the word that Jesus uses. I found like this deserves another look. And so, going back and looking at this word and then trying to connect it with what Jesus was saying, I realized, wow, this was a word that was used by, Socrates was kind of as the father of philosophy. He's kind of the first thinker, and happiness was his subject that he started digging through. And then Plato and Aristotle, like this is what they would talk about, the happy life. But it was always connected to the gods. It's always connected to the pantheon of the Greek gods, the goddess of wine, the goddess of merriment and mirth. It's never connected to ordinary people. In fact, ordinary people couldn't have it. Eventually they started saying, through virtue, you could have Makarios, but we're so far removed from having any virtue that we can't get to virtue, let alone then get to happiness. And Jesus steps on, kind of debuts his first message, his first sermon with this word happiness. Like he's going to offer them not 10 commandments or, 8 paths of what you need to do, or he's going to offer people happiness. And so he starts with just ordinary fishermen, the common folk, blue collar workers. And he starts off by redistributing happiness from the gods, so to speak, to the ordinary people. And he does it by marrying that word with our everyday struggles, right? Poor in spirit, hunger and thirsting for righteousness, being meek and not being necessarily assertive and grabbing or taking or being aggressive and pulling things to us. That it's not something that we pursue. It's not external, but it's an internal reality. It's something that's in here, which we kind of intuitively know, but the world around us tells us something different. So when Mike said that and suggested that, and then I started digging through it, I had my own moment in that journey of going, gosh, this is something that not only does God want for us, but this is something that God is doing everything that God can to get it to us no matter where we're at. And we just have to kind of make room for it. That was kind of like, for me, that was kind of like the first, like, I think the image I have in my mind when I say that is if you're in a dark room and you walk over and you pull back the curtain and the sun's shining outside. And if you just pull back the curtain, it makes room and the sun comes flooding in. Like it rushes in. And I felt like that's what Jesus was offering us when he went through these 8 beautiful, happy oracles, that he was offering us, hey, it's as easy as this. It's right here. It's in your breath. It's in your moment. And so I think at that point I was so excited to then start unpacking, the 8 with Mike and looking at each one, because I've never heard anyone approach it from that perspective before. And I felt it was fresh, and not just for the sake of the Beatitudes, but I think it was offering what a lot of scholars have been, recent theologians have been saying, that there has to be a return to within theology. There has to be a return to joy and a return to happiness. But they weren't giving the theological tools for that. They were just observing that there's a need here. There's a loss. There's a deficit. And it was like, yes, we're on to, this is the first place to begin.
So again, listen to Refocused Radio, watching this online, talking to our guests today, 2 of them, Pastor Mike Hayes and also Dr. Jeffrey Garner, talking about their book that you can get right now. It's available. It's Real Happy, Jesus' Surprising Path to Genuine Joy. I want to kind of dive in on that genuine part. Genuine joy, you kind of touched on it with the spirit. And if you say spirit versus material, we live in a world where material happiness It's like a band-aid. We all naturally want to have success. We all naturally want to achieve certain things, whether it's on paper with a degree or if it's a certificate, some award. It's always something that we see in the physical world. But when you think about the spiritual side of things, we can have all those materials, but still feel empty. How does the book navigate that tone as well? Because what I'm getting from it is that there is a inner place that needs to be developed, and it's kind of hard to do that from an external point of view.
I think, and Jeff did a good job opening this up. And if I could just jump on the translation for a moment, because all of these 8 oracles, they don't really build on each other, they all stand alone. However, I think it's fitting that this was the first one, because the normal translation to English says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And the proper translation of those words is more like this: really blissfully, unbelievably happy are those who create a void in their heart for God to fill. It's definitely the word for void or empty. Now, that's very different than blessed are the poor in spirit. Because listen, through the ages, and church history is a thing that I've always been interested in. My dad taught Old Testament and church history in a Bible college. I was raised around it. I love history. But when you look at the history, one of the reasons that the church centuries ago created what they called a vow of poverty is that those who are in ministry cannot own any personal accoutrements of this world. They can't have their own place, their property, even their clothing. And so the goal became, I read a very sad book written by a monk whose goal was the one garment, robe that I have made of like burlap, the one garment I have, I must not come to the end of my life and die with this garment having life still left in it. I have to time the wear of this garment and my lifespan so that it's totally worn out and worthless when I live my last day. Otherwise, I'm not going to satisfy this requirement that I have taken, which is a vow of poverty, taken primarily from this verse. This is not what Jesus' intention was at all, for us to live under a vow of poverty. It was, are you willing to create an empty place that I can fill? How long are you going to keep filling it with boats and houses and girls and men and designer clothes and fame and fortune? There's no room for me. So if you want real happiness, you've got to start emptying some things out. And then there's room for real, genuine joy to come in. But you know what? I'm not sure, because we're all living our lives, right? And I've lived probably, I know, more years than either one of you guys have. So in that regard, I got you. Um, it's almost like we have to learn this for ourselves. Because I had someone I was talking to about this one time. They're like, well, you've had a lot of success, though. Let me experience some success. And then I'll tell you whether I agree with you or not that that's not the way you find real happiness. But see, I can tell you from the other side of that journey that striving for happiness by the stuff we accumulate is a worthless journey. I live here in Dallas, and I suppose I'm a frustrated Cowboy fan because if you follow the Cowboys, you're going to have some frustration. But I remember at one time, I had 25 of the starters on the Dallas Cowboys in the great years, members of my church, and I knew them very well. And I was a chaplain for the Cowboys for those teams. I did chapels for them, pre-game chapels for several years. I remember when a few years ago in the great years of the Cowboys when they won 3 out of 5 or 6 years the Super Bowl. One of the linemen that was a All Pro and he was a funny guy and he attended our church and I asked him about the joy of winning the Super Bowl and he just got in his ring and he's like, it didn't last as long as I thought. And I said, really? He said, yeah, you set your whole life goal for this, then you win it. And he threw back his head and laughed. He was a real funny guy anyway. And he said, they do it every year. In other words, if I'm placing my whole life and happiness on winning this, then, and I did, then next year it's a whole new contest, and I don't know if I will or not. So maybe I won't be happy very long. So we all have to learn that lesson, though, for ourselves that the pursuit of things as success doesn't result in happiness. And then, as I was going to say, the opposite that Jesus taught surprised me. In the Beatitudes, the opposite of happiness is not unhappiness. The opposite of happiness is worry. Because in that message, the second half of his message, after he gives us 8 ways to be really happy, he just attacks worry. That's why I've got this little poppy pin on my shirt here. We put it on the front of our book because the translators changed it in about the 1500s to a lily, but it was actually the word for poppy because that's a flower that grows all over the northern hills of Israel. And Jesus probably just pointed down at one that was growing, like there were growing everywhere when I was sitting on that hill and got the impetus to write this book. And Jesus said, consider the poppies. They don't work hard, they don't dress themselves. They're planted and rooted in ground that they have no guarantee that it's going to rain tomorrow, but they're beautiful and they're waving in the breeze. And he made the analogy, they are happy because they're worry free. They're just dependent. He said, Solomon, our greatest king, was never dressed like one of them. Look at them. They're filled with joy, they're bright in color, and they're not worrying. So, the other half of the message of happiness is the learning the absence of worry and worry at the same time. They don't fit.
Once again, listen, I Refocused Radio and watching this online. And you can get a copy of this book, like it says, on Amazon available. Real Happy, Jesus' Surprising Path to Genuine Joy. And everything you're saying ties back to my earlier pitch about focusing on the word genuine, because when you think about genuine, first thing I feel is what's really real and what's just kind of noise out there. And when you think about some places in the Bible and talks about, God knows the plans for you. He's not guessing the plans. He's saying he knows the plan. So that kicks out worry out the door. Supposedly, we're human nature, so we're going to worry no matter what. But he kind of does take care of those aspects of, I already have my plans for you. You don't really have to worry about a whole lot except for maybe follow my lead, maybe, because when we try to find our own path, it seems to take us to hard knocks of life. So my last thing I want to say before I pass it to Jeffrey is the other thing that's interesting. When you look at the Bible, I'm an amateur, I'm not a pastor, but looking through a lens of someone who's trying to learn about it and trying to understand it better. The only way you actually get better is if you get involved. Like, you can't just feel happy and say happy things and have happy thoughts. You actually have to be involved at some point, and that takes you outside your comfort zone. So that's basically what I'm trying to pitch to you, Dr. Jeffrey, is when you think about being active, how much does that play and hold weight to the whole process of being happy? Because anybody can have a happy thought, but until you start changing, you don't remain the same.
Yeah, you're connecting a dot that it's like really, in fact, it's it's how Jesus ends that Sermon on the Mount. He talks about, there's two men building a house, and one builds his house on sand and it collapses because of a storm. And the other one builds his house on a rock, and the same storm comes along and his house is fine. And he just says, the people that take my words and just talk about them are people that build their house on sand. It's not going to do you any good. A storm's going to come along, and because you're not actively following and engaging them in your life, doing them, but if you're a wise person, you take what I'm saying and you act on it. You do something about it. And as it relates to, like to the principles of real happy, of the Beatitudes and the behaviors that we take on, I think, Jesus gives like three action items that a person can that they can engage in on the same sermon. Right after he talks about the happiness, he says you can, be generous and give. That's one way you can make room, is by taking some of the extra stuff you have in your life and sharing it with someone else. He talks about fasting, but another way is you can abstain from something instead of just consuming everything, media, TV, entertainment, whatever. Pull back and create margin in your life by abstaining from something, by creating some abstinence in your life. And then the third thing he says has to do with our time. It's prayer. Creating margin or time in your life to have a conversation with God, or to let God have a conversation with you. It creates space for the happiness and the joy of heaven to flood into your heart. But if you're so busy pursuing this, chasing that, trying to accomplish this, trying to possess that, if you're so busy with all of that, you won't have margin in your life to experience the happiness that God wants to fill you with. And Mike said it so well. He's like, we're trying to put, and it's St. Augustine said it, we have this God-sized hole inside of us and we feel empty. And so we start cramming everything from material to, accomplishments, achievements, education, whatever it is. And you get the degree and then you're like, well, I need another one. I need another one. It's never enough. It's constant. It's with everything. And at some point you have to stop and just go, okay, these things don't fit in this hole in my heart. I am made in the image of God. In fact, there's this Jewish idea that when it says that we are made in the image of God, it's like an imprint. Like if you took your hand and you pushed it into the sand and it creates a space, right? That we are this imprint of God. And the only thing that can fit in that is God. That we have this kind of this space for God to fill. And so you have to find the things that get you there, and you have to act on it. And I think when a person does that, they find themselves behaving or responding their way into new ways of thinking, into new ways of experience. That you can't have, you have to have an experience of it by the things in your life, by your behaviors that open you up to an understanding. That's what I'm trying to say. And so, yes, absolutely. It is not just we sit around and we talk about it, but it's an actual stepping forward, responding in obedience to that call that Christ is calling us to.
And Pastor Hayes, on kind of jumping on that, is that you think about renewing of your mind. Bible talks about somewhere, y'all know the address better than I do, but it also talks about not conforming to the world, but be
that's a great
transformed
question, and
by
I
the
think
renewing
that
of your mind. How
I
does
like that
that
saying.
renewal of our mind
It's not
help
in the
us with
scripture. Maybe it
understanding
should be, but
the presence
you
of
can't.
being
It's
happy
said
too?
that you can't feel your way into an action, but you can act your way into a feeling. And there's a whole lot of people sitting around. And listen, I don't mean this statement I'm about to make to be harsh or to be judgmental about anybody. I have taken in my life before, I have taken antidepressant medication when I needed it. And I understand that maybe 50% of America takes some form of something, trying to make sure that their mental capacity is where they would like it to be. But the bottom line is those experts that are in that field, and I am not one that is an expert on the brain and understanding the mind and how all that works, will tell you, they'll be the first to tell you that, we can medicate and we can help, but most of the people that we treat, there is a common thread that is often there. And it is that their life has spiraled in and in and in until they are the middle of the whole thing. So your thoughts become how you're doing. It's like that funny, this is probably a dad joke. I don't know. For some reason, I find it funnier than everybody else. But this guy that was real narcissistic, he was sitting with his friend in a restaurant over coffee, and he talked about himself nonstop for 2 hours. And then finally he said, listen, I have taken so much time talking about me. Let's change the subject. What do you think about me? so, so, so somehow our lives get so entwined with us. And what Jesus was saying is kick some walls down and get out there and get involved a little bit with somebody else and their situation, and you'll be
Yeah.
shocked how much joy you can get out of that. This is very practical, but I literally tell people that I'm counseling because most of the people I know have more clothes in their closet than they can wear, and they probably even have a storage place rented for $200 a month to put some more stuff that they can't put in their closet. And I say to them, listen, why don't you go home and go through your closet and be really generous? Don't think about, I'm going to get rid of the junk or the stuff that's out of style. Be really generous and take half of the clothes in your closet, half of the shoes, and give them away. Go give them to a local ministry or Goodwill that's doing things for people that have nothing. And they are shocked at how happy they feel with that act of physically getting rid of some stuff that they really don't need, because we attach meaning to it that it doesn't deserve. You can fill your closet up until you have no room, and then you go rent a storage room, and then you fill that up. My contention is if you've got a storage building that you haven't visited in 3 years, you don't need the stuff in that storage building. Give it away. So I think what we've come down to is happiness is a verb. It's an action word. It shows up, it bubbles up out of your heart, and you can't help but just show it and give it away. And it is infectious. Try it with a smile. You would be shocked how many people respond, and it's their second response. Their first response is to look at you weird, like, what do you want? And then almost instantly, it's followed by a nice smile back. And that's something that doesn't cost you a thing. I smiled at somebody the other day and they looked at me kind of almost a defensive, dirty look. And then in 1 second, they smiled back at me and said, nice smile, thanks. I was in Washington, D.C. here a while back, and I went in, my wife and I were walking around in Georgetown, and we went in a antique shop, and there were two elderly ladies behind the counter. And I said, good morning, how are you doing? Gave them a nice smile. And one of them said, you must not be from here. Are you from Texas? And I said, I happen to be from Texas. How did you know? I thought she picked up my accent. She said, no, you said hi and smiled. We don't do that around here. So everybody wants to be happy, but not everybody's practicing a good way to do that. So that's what we're trying to do, man. Just spread the joy.
Once again, listen to Refocused Radio and watching us online. You can get the book, copy of the book that we've been discussing throughout the whole show. Real Happy, Jesus Surprising, Path to Genuine Joy. Last thing I want to pass to Dr. Jeffrey Garner is also in the Bible. You know that there's so many different characters and stories. And what's interesting is that every character has his flaws, has his battles, has his ups and downs. But you can make a point that this principle of real happy is until we surrender certain things, then we probably truly will never find that happiness.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, really a great, all the four gospels have a different motif or focus on what it looked like to follow Jesus. And the one that you're hitting on right now is stated over and over in Mark. Every time somebody comes to Jesus in the Gospel of Mark, they leave something behind. Every time. There's the nets. There's the money left at the table with Levi. There's the blind man Bartimaeus, who Jesus heals him, and he gets up, and it says, and he left his cloak behind, and the cloak was the what they would catch the money in that people would give. So he leaves the container that he would beg for money, and he leaves that behind. And then the very end of the book, you have the young man running through the garden without any clothes on. It's just like this, when Jesus goes to the cross, it's this moment of letting go of everything, right? And I think you're touching on a point that's really important. That's really important, because when we recognize what we're getting in return, we have to let go. We let go of something in order to open ourselves up for something greater, right? There's something greater that's being offered to us. But if I keep holding on to my toothpick for dear life, like this is my whole life, my life depends on this toothpick, and God's trying to offer me a golden fork. And I'm like, but man, you have no idea. This wooden toothpick has been with me through thick and thin. And so there is that idea of letting go, of letting go of something in order to be open to receive something else. And one of the stories that we open up with in the book, Real Happy, is it's kind of the setting. It was for me was in 2014. Or 2010, the San Francisco Giants were playing in the World Series, and I was sitting at the park listening to the game, waiting for my son, who was had football practice, and we hit a home run, and I jump out of my car, and I'm like so excited because we hit this home run, and we're going to win the World Series, right? So I jump out of my car and I start running around my car, just woohoo, just jumping up and down and having a moment. And there was this homeless guy that's sitting under a tree, right? Watching this crazy guy running around a Volkswagen Jetta, and so he gets up and kind of ambles over there, and he starts kind of running around the car with me. But I wasn't really thinking of it. I just was like, oh yeah. He runs around the car with me. We stop, and then he high fives me, and I high five him, and then I turn around, and we're done kind of with the whole celebration. I turn around and go over to the car to get back in the car, and as I open up the door to get in the car, he taps me on the shoulder, and so I turn around. He goes, "Hey, why are we so happy?" And I was like, it hit me. This guy doesn't even know why I'm happy, but he sees me happy and he wants to be happy too. So he jumps into my little party that I'm having just because we all yearn and we all long for happiness so much that we'll celebrate. But then that's not enough, right? It's not enough to just celebrate with someone else in a meaningless way. We want to understand the meaning of happiness. And I think that's what Jesus is doing. That if a person is willing to give up whatever and start walking down this path, they're going to get the meaning behind the joy that Jesus is offering, because that's what we want. Why is it such good news that you're giving to me? Why are we so happy and have so much joy? And I think the journey lets that unfold in a deeply meaningful way.
Last thing I'll hit with Pastor Mike Hayes is someone watching or listening to this, finish the sentence for them. Real happiness is.
Real happiness is understanding that you are deeply loved just like you are. You don't have to perform anything, you don't have to achieve anything, you don't have to do anything to be impressive to God. And our example is that when Jesus, as the Son of God, was being baptized in the Jordan River, he was 30 years old. He hadn't even started his ministry. He hadn't healed one person. He hadn't preached one sermon. He had accomplished nothing but maybe being a good son to Joseph and learning some carpentry skills. But the Bible says that when he came up out of the water, baptism being an act of obedience and submission, when he came up out of the water, the heavens opened and the Father was heard to say, "This is my dearly beloved Son, in whom I am so pleased." And if we don't understand that we are unbelievably cherished and loved by God without accomplishing any of the world's success marks, it's not how many benchmarks you check off in your life that makes you happy. It is that before you were ever formed in your mother's womb, God bathed you in his love and his happiness. And here's the victory that I found in researching this book and changed my life, because I wasn't real happy. I was put on happy. My happiness was, I wasn't fake, but I was going from one high to the next. If I accomplish this, if I do this, if I build this bigger, if I meet this person, if I accomplish that, if I earn that. And that is in my early 40s, that burnt me out. That will burn you out. I heard something crash and it was on fire, and I looked around and it was me, because you can only go so long. And that's what millions are doing right now, trying to do enough to earn what is already theirs. And it's as simple
Mm-hmm.
as that. And real happiness is just that. And you know what? We are sometimes often stubborn. You know, I read one time in an old Scottish hunting lodge that had been used for great world leaders to meet and solve problems. They had a beautiful uh, uh, trunk of a tree had been carved out and was mounted over this massive fireplace. And the author that was had written this that I was reading said that he was sitting there in the evening, couple of them smoking a pipe, dog laying at his feet asleep, had had a beautiful meal, great friends around, but things were quieting down. And he looked up at the mantle of this fireplace, and across the front of this massive wood mantle was carved the words in Old English, "Would you choose to be right or be reconciled?" And he said, I thought about that and it changed my life, because so many times we fight to be right, to look right, to wear the right thing, to have the right job, to earn the right girlfriend. And meanwhile, we're not reconciled to anything in our lives. It's all in chaos. And we're constantly striving to climb a mountain that when we get to the top of it, we won't be any happier than we were at the bottom of it, because it's a spiritual issue. It's not an accomplishment issue. And there is real
Mm-hmm.
happiness available, and it's right under our nose. And it's almost like that. One of the Beatitudes literally says, "Happy are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." Now, mourn there doesn't always mean just like you would cry over the loss of a loved one at a funeral. It just means, it's the word sad. You're sad, you want to be happy, then make room for my comfort, because I'll comfort you to such a level you cannot stay sad. So do you want to be sad or do you want to be comforted? Well, I choose to be comforted. And it's so comforting to me to hear from my Father, "I love you just like you are, Mike. Long way from perfect, but I'm going to love you through the whole journey. And I love you right now. And if you don't accomplish another thing, I won't love you any more or less." And John the beloved, and by the way, Dr. Jeff should be talking right here because his PhD is actually in the study of John the beloved and his writings. And that's one of the revelations of John, is that he writes the book of John, and I learned this from you, Jeff. He writes the book of John to teach us that he's not the beloved, we are the beloved. It's not John the beloved, it's us the beloved that John is writing to us about how to be that. So,
Yeah, I've heard that before in that frame where you said that. I think that's good because I think the way you broke it down too with Jesus later in life, and it wasn't his degrees and his massive following and what he was able to accomplish from the scene. It was the moment when God said, "This is my son who I am well pleased." And if we can marinate, if you will, on that seed, then we can see that we too can be in that position where he says, "I'm pleased with you. I'm not pleased with your following. I'm not pleased with your platform." You said something that last thing I'm gonna do is give it to Jeffrey real fast. But before we do that, is you said something that really hit home, and I think it'd be related to anyone who watches this and listens, and that is being able to do this show. I've been blessed to do this since 2017. I probably interviewed people I never even imagined that I'll be able to even talk to, let alone just make a connection with. But it's just like the reference point with the Cowboys who had a ring in the championship trophy. Once that passes by, you're like, now what? Because you built the hype of what it could feel like. But then when that moment passed, you just find out that these are normal people who just breathe oxygen. So what? They have millions of dollars. So what? Some of them might have billions of dollars. But the point is so what? Because yes, they have accomplished a lot, but that doesn't define the true meaning of life. So in the Bible, it talks about what does it profit a man to gain the whole world but to lose his own soul? I think about that just by some of the points you made, because we will spend most of our lives trying to prove ourselves to others. But the question is, for what, though? And with that, I'll let Dr. Jeffrey have last words on the book and what he hopes people take out from everything y'all do.
Yeah, Mike and I have talked about this a lot, like what we hope for the book. More than anything is just that the message that God is happy and delights in your happiness and your joy, and God is willing to do everything God can do to bring that about in your life. It's just up to you to receive it and to put yourself in a position to let God love you and to let God's joy and happiness come into your life. And I think, for both Mike and I, our greatest joy, now that we have the joy, is to see others embrace that and become messengers of that beautiful good news, become messengers of joy, messengers of happiness to their world, their neighborhood, their friends and their family. I think that would be it. And maybe to that end, if I can, I would just say, I would love to just take 15 seconds here and give people an opportunity to experience it right now. Like, it's not something that you have to run off and accomplish somewhere. But in this moment, if you just stop right now and took a deep, 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 deep breath, created space in your lungs, created space, and just kind of let all the worry that Mike was talking about, all the anxieties and stresses, let all of that just rush out. And for one moment, recognize the richness that is present with you in each breath, that God is near you, God is with you. There is enough in this moment, in this minute, in this hour to take care of this moment, this minute, this hour. And if you'll put a little smile on your face, even in the midst of sorrow, even in the midst of setback and disappointment, if you'll smile because God is with you in this moment, and you're not abandoned, you're not alone, and there is enough of God's presence to get you through this, to move you forward to what your ultimate calling and greatest design of God is for you, to become what you're meant to be. There's enough in that just to breathe that in, smile, and just let God love you. The image that I have in my mind is what Mike was talking about a moment ago of Jesus standing in the waters. And I love the way that Luke says it. It says, and when the people were getting baptized, Jesus got baptized too. It's almost like he follows them into the water, you know? It's like, but when he's in the water, he is fully available for that moment to shine on him and to receive it. And I would just say, let God smile on you, let God love you, and receive the joy that he has for you. And as for the book, get the book and read about all the different places, because happiness comes in a spectrum. You know, it's and that's what we talk about. There's a full spectrum of happiness, of God's happiness, that you can have in those 8 paths. They're kind of laid out for us in those 8 steps that are laid out in Real Happy.
Well, once again, you've been listening on Refocused Radio and watching us online, talking to our guest, Dr. Jeffrey Garner, and also Pastor Mike Hayes. To both of y'all, I want to say thanks for what you're doing for the community. And like always, thank you for your time.
Well, it's been a joy to be on with you today. You've done a great job. I love your spirit, your heart for doing this. And 2017, you've been at this a decade very soon, and I'm grateful for that. I was thinking about it as you gave us a moment to mention the book, and I appreciate that. It is on Amazon and everywhere you want to get a book, but something that we're proud of just recently, because I enjoy Audible books myself and I listen to them. Jeff and I recorded this on Audible in our own voice. The parts that we wrote, we recite, and we did it where it's designed for receiving and for rest. It's a great book to listen to as you relax in the evening or go to sleep, and folks can download that too. And everything they do in the way of purchasing this book, and it also has a workbook that's downloadable for it that goes with the book. So we've designed it. People are doing book clubs with it, and Bible studies and so forth. So just avail yourself of it, and it helps us push this rock further up the mountain, because our heart is really to see everybody filled with the kind of happiness and joy that we found. So thank you so much for your time and for having us on as guests. You've done a great job.
Appreciate it. Y'all have a good one.